Space. So expansive. So mysterious. What if I told you there was a series of games set in the far-off future? One where humanity has explored vast reaches of our universe. One where mankind has established a foothold in an expansive galaxy of strange creatures from far-off planets. Yeah, those Mass Effect games are pretty good. But wait, what if I told you that instead of facing that aspect, the games instead spend 90% of their time on underdeveloped planets, following the same fantasy rules that literally every JRPG follows? Sorry, how's it going? Today I want to talk to you about a series that is near and dear to my heart. The first game that I ever truly got invested in. Despite my earlier gripes, Star Ocean is an interesting and long-running series spanning multiple generations of consoles. It was originally created in 1996 by Tri-Ace, a group of developers who did most of the work on Tales of Phantasia, but due to creative differences ended up leaving Namco and starting their own company. But their mark on the two series really shows, as the two have a lot in common. Both series tend to have a strong focus on characters and setting. They both also have rather similar real-time party-based combat systems, and they even both have the exact same composer. Star Ocean has, for the most part, received a pretty reasonable amount of success, but not all legacies last forever.
Ha! A rather leisurely return for the great Earth hero, Lightspeed Kenny, wouldn't you say? It hardly bodes well for the commander of such an important mission to miss his own departure ceremony.
Today, I want to cover in a little bit of detail every game in the series, and talk about what I call the rise and fall of Star Ocean. Originally released in 1996, though not seeing a true American release until the PSP remake in 2007, Star Ocean 1 sets the groundwork for the series. The characters are 2D sprites, but the game itself plays in a 3D isometric view. When it came to traversing towns and dungeons, this was pretty regular stuff, but when it came to the combat, things took a more real-time approach. Speaking personally, I found the combat of Star Ocean to be a lot more interesting than most of the games that were released around its time. For example, compared to its sister game Tales of Phantasia, I found Star Ocean to be a lot faster and more fluid, with it being easier to chain skills into one another, and the ability to quickly swap between party members mid-combat. However, the combat does come to a screeching halt whenever someone casts a spell.
Whoops!
The game also established a lot of mainstays of the series. Things like optional recruitable party members, a crafting system, and an affection system, which I'll get into a little later. The game centers around a boy named Roddick and his two friends, Millie and Dorn. They live a humble life in a simple village, but one day, news of a disease spreading to other villages reaches theirs. Several people end up getting diagnosed with the disease, including their friend Dorn, so they head to the top of a mountain where a supposed cure exists. However, what they find at the top of the mountain is not a cure, but Earthlings. For you see, Roddick is not a human, but a Felpool, a race from this small, underdeveloped planet known as Roke. The much more advanced space-traveling race of Earth have come to this planet because the enemies of Earth, a group known as Lizonians, are apparently the cause of this disease. The pair from Earth, a man named Ronix and a woman named Elia, have come to see what exactly the Lizonians are up to. And so your group worked together to find a cure for the disease, stop the Lizonians, and assemble an entourage of wacky characters, such as cat girls, werewolves, angels, Welch. The plot itself I would call generically good. It's not really gonna blow you away by any means, but it's entertaining enough to warrant a playthrough. The characters themselves would be pretty forgettable if not for an interesting little feature that the game provides. Similar to the skits from Tales of, you can visit prior towns. When you do, there's an option to split up with the rest of your party. While exploring the town, you may run into your party members, alone or maybe two together, and by talking to them, you'll get a small little event. And a lot of the character's personality gets built up through this way. There are tons of these events scattered throughout the game. They bring a lot of personality and interaction to an otherwise pretty straightforward game. That being said, it can be quite annoying to trek halfway back across the continent because one event doesn't start until you complete a certain series of other events. Nevertheless, it is a neat idea and adds a lot of replayability as well as color to the game. Ultimately, for a first game, Star Ocean was a pretty rousing success, so it's no surprise that a sequel was on the horizon. Star Ocean: The Second Story, or Second Evolution on the PSP, is set a few years after the events of Star Ocean 1. Unlike in the first game, you get a choice in which protagonist you'll follow. The first is Claude, son of Ronix and... He's a boy with a bit of a chip on his shoulder, as the reputation of his parents, who apparently got famous after the events of the first game, has been hoisted upon him his entire life. The other protagonist is a girl by the name of Rena. Born with the mystical power of healing on an underdeveloped planet by the name of Expel, she's never known her true parents and has always dreamed of exploring to find out who exactly they are. The plots between the two protagonists vary only slightly. You only really get a different point of view in a couple different scenes when they split up from time to time. The actual plot involves Claude on a routine scouting mission to explore a new planet. Under the command of his father, they're tasked with exploring some ruins. Inside, Claude finds a strange device, and against his father's orders, he touches it. Doing so suddenly, without warning, transports him to the planet of Expel. While there, he is attacked by a monster, but fortunately has his standard issue phase gun to protect himself. But the girl, Rena, sees him and the futuristic weapon that he's using. She mistakes him for a legend that exists on Expel, a being known as the Warrior of Light who wields a Sword of Light, which is what she thinks Claude's blaster is. Claude, trying not to expose this underdeveloped planet to the universe outside, plays along with it for a little bit and ends up staying at Rena's village. Eventually, he hears tale of a meteorite that crashed into the planet not that long ago. The meteorite is known as the Sorcery Globe, and Claude opts to investigate it, hoping to find a way home. Rena, acting as his guide, goes with him, hoping to find some info on her parents. Together they travel the land, once again thwarting evil, killing monsters, and gaining a wacky entourage. This time, cat boys, dragon men, triclopses, and Welch. The game as a whole just feels like a better version of the first one. The plot is more refined, the characters more memorable and developed, and the gameplay is, well, if you're playing the PSP versions, the gameplay is exactly the same. But they're both based off the original PS1 engine for Star Ocean: The Second Story. But if that's not enough to catch your interest, maybe this will. So remember how I mentioned that affection system a little while back? In the original game, it only changed a couple things. A couple different events here or there, and I think there was one alternate ending. In Star Ocean 2, there's the potential to see close to 100 different endings. How, you ask? Simple. Every character has a unique ending with every other character. They're not all necessarily romantic, but... let's say you want an ending with the masculine and silent Diaz paired off with the gentle and calm Noel. Well, you got that. Maybe you want the two overly attractive ladies to end up together. Well, you can do that too. Maybe you realize the entire game was basically a love story of Claude and Rena from the beginning, and what better way to end it than to have the two of them have a happy ending together. Or maybe you just thought Chisato was a pedophile and would go after Leon. Whatever your kink is, Star Ocean 2 provides you with the tools to do it. Ultimately, Star Ocean 2 is just something I would classify as a great game, one that I still play to this day. But things obviously aren't over for the Star Ocean series. A new console generation was on the horizon, and so, a new game had to be made. Oh, wait a minute, I forgot to talk about the sequel to Star Ocean 2, Star Ocean Blue Sphere. And that's enough of that. Star Ocean till the end of time. Where do I even begin with a game like this? Let's start with the good stuff. The gameplay in Star Ocean 3 is possibly the best in the series. The combat is more fast and fluid than ever before. With the ability to chain multiple skills together and quickly switch between party members, you can honestly create some really interesting combos. Not to mention, a lot of the late game skills just look damn cool. Another aspect, which I don't often touch on, is I actually think that these are some of the best designed dungeons that I've ever seen in an RPG. There's interesting locales, lots of varied monsters, and some actually very fun puzzles. They aren't all home runs. I mean, the post-game dungeon Sphere 211 is just the same 8 designs repeated over and over again. But for the most part, a lot of them are really well made. The plot, on the other hand, is not so cut and dry. The best way I really have to describe the plot of Star Ocean is there's a lot of moments like this.
Rosso, head towards that huge object over there.
Yes, little one.
But there's a lot more moments like this.
Barging into people's rooms isn't called taking a walk. That's for burglars, or lost kids, or stalkers, or groupies.
Okay then, we're lost.
Let's just start with the basics. The game opens with our young, strapping protagonist, Fate Flying God, on vacation with his childhood friend Sophia and his parents. After a combat tutorial and a few wacky antics, the vacation resort that you're staying at is attacked by a shark-like alien race known as the Vendini. In the ensuing chaos, Fate is separated from his parents, but manages to make it to an escape transport. Unfortunately, it seems like the Vendini are chasing the transport ship, and their warships are much more powerful than the simple transport vessel you're on. So everyone on board is forced to escape in single-man escape pods. Fate, now separated from his friends and family, is forced into the dark depths of space. Unfortunately, he's sent to one of the most boring tutorial planets possible, full of the most saccharine elf-like people you've ever seen, and one of the most forgettable villains you've ever seen.
What's wrong, mister? You got a bellyache?
No funny moves if you want to stay alive. Play nice and I'll let you live a little longer. That was a phase gun, so you must be Norton. Yeah, that's me. I am Norton the Great.
But fortunately, Fate is saved from this fate by Cliff and Mirage, 2 members of what is essentially a space terrorist group. It seems that they were looking for Fate specifically, which, why the hell was a terrorist group looking for Fate specifically? So they start taking Fate back to their leader, where they will give Fate all the answers he seeks. But, unfortunately, they got attacked by the Vendini again and crash land on yet another undeveloped planet. Hooray. And that kind of sums up my opinion of the plot of Star Ocean 3. There's some really high-octane, very interesting moments, but they're separated by a lot of really long and boring sections. The game is just crawling with tired and predictable tropes, generically evil villains who just want power.
I thought sending only one Crimson Blade was a bit light. The compassion of these followers of Abris is really playing into our hands.
Pointless subplots that go absolutely nowhere and you have no investment in.
Well, he's stabilized a little bit, but he's still in grave danger. Whatever attacked him, it injured him so greatly that healing is almost impossible. We don't have the tools to help him.
No.
But it's not all terrible. The game has this weird knack for world building. Hidden away in one of the menus are pages and pages of text dumps full of info on all the planets and races that inhabit this universe. But more interesting than that, there's just a lot of little events that you can find. Little windows into the world that exists that you don't feel like you interact with. You're just sort of happening by and catching a moment of it. Things like a woman who's taking care of another man's house while he's away, and it's implied that he went off to join the enemy, and she was sticking around in a vain hope that one day he would come back and have a place to call home. Or one about a king who's in love with a general from an enemy nation. The king wants to follow his heart and forget about the nation that he's in charge of, but the enemy general instead chooses her duty over what her heart wants. Or whatever the fuck this is. It's weird because there's just so many simple plot elements in this game, but there's also just so much evidence of a lot of care and attention to detail being put into many aspects of the game. I could go on and on about the many ups and downs of Star Ocean 3's plot, but let's end it here for now. There's just one final thing I want to talk about. The elephant in the room. You see, the most memorable thing about Star Ocean 3's plot is a big twist that comes halfway through the game. If you don't want the plot of a 14-year-old game to be spoiled for you, then jump to this timestamp here. But essentially, the big plot twist is the entire universe is a video game. Beings from another dimension created everything in this universe, and we're just a bunch of data. As far as plot twists go, yeah, it's pretty dumb, but I don't really think that's the problem with it. I think the main problem is that once you get into 4D space, a lot of the characters they introduce are just uninteresting. They introduced a bunch of programmers that help create the game you're in, and for the most part, almost none of them have any personality. The only one you vaguely get to know is this girl named Blair, who really isn't that interesting. And that's not even touching on the main villain of the game, Luthor, who gets barely any build-up and you only meet at the very end of the game. But yeah, the plot of Star Ocean 3 is really where things start to get complicated. It's not great, but it's not terrible either. The characters themselves are in a similar boat. You don't get as much variety as in the old games, no werewolves or cat people. Pretty much everyone in the game is just human or an alien that looks exactly like a human. Human but strong, human but with a tail, human but lolly. But the characters themselves are, for the most part, better developed than in the previous games. The game generally spends more time focusing on their growth and backstory. However, the cost of that is the removal of a lot of the private actions from the previous games. While in the old games you could spend a lot of time visiting previous towns and seeing what your characters were up to, in this one they do exist, but they're far, far fewer. As such, the characters, while generally more rounded, are also lacking a lot of the charm that they had from the previous games. They also removed a big chunk of the multiple ending aspect, as now you can only pair characters off with fate and fate alone.
Ah, perfect. Wanna marry my daughter?
What? Claire?
In any case, at the end of the day, I don't really have too much more to say about Star Ocean 3. It was a pretty decent game, but it had just a few, do you hear that? Oh, fuck, it's the crafting system. We don't have time to get into that. That could take an entire video just to explain. Quick, get to Star Ocean 4.
Lim.
Lim? Would you rather we call you Lim?
Edgy. Ray Ray. Edgy Ray
Edgy?
Ray. Edgy Ray Ray. Edgy Ray Ray.
Ray, huh?
Is it too late to go back to Star Ocean 3? I mean, I could talk about that crafting system. I'm sure we could get a lot of fun out of Star Ocean 4 it is. Right, Star Ocean The Last Hope. Let's just start with the basics. Star Ocean 4 was released in 2009, and was set to be a prequel to Star Ocean 1, essentially. It was going to tell the story of man's first voyage beyond our own solar system into deep space, and meeting with other intelligent life forms. It's an interesting premise, honestly, and backed up by a cool-looking combat system and a promise to be more based on sci-fi rather than fantasy, I was more hyped for this game than I have been for any other game. So, when the release day arrived and I got my copy, the first impressions were pretty good. The combat has this emphasis on counterattacking, which I wasn't all that huge a fan of, but it managed to keep the speed and fluidity of Star Ocean 3. Only now with 4 party members instead of 3, and even flashier moves. So yeah, the gameplay was pretty good, but what about the plot? Honestly, it wasn't bad either. As I said, the premise is pretty interesting. Our two main characters, Edge and Raimi, are essentially scouts, sent ahead of the rest of the convoy to survey the area where they'll be landing. Of course, things go wrong, they crash land, fight a few monsters, but they end up finding help from an alien by the name of FaZe. It seems that humanity has actually been secretly in contact with FaZe's race for the past decade or so, and the reason that they came to this planet specifically was because of that race. And thus the true goal of the game is revealed. Edge and Raimi are given their own ship and tasked with exploring the surrounding space. It's just a pretty cool setup. There's tons of potential behind it, so why am I acting like this game wore a swastika t-shirt to a synagogue? Well, that's complicated. There's a number of reasons, but if I had to sum it up in one, I guess I would say it's because this game fucking sucks.
Is this man from that ship?
Do something! Do something! Do something!
Let's go through the characters, shall we? First of all, we got our main character, Edge. He'd be alright if he didn't go through one of the most hackneyed emo, "it's all my fault" plot lines imaginable.
It's all my fault!
No! Edge, you did it because you wanted to save the future!
That's no excuse at all!
And there's Raimi, whose entire relevance to the plot just seems to be a motivator for Edge. And then there's FaZe. We'll come back to FaZe. And then, of course, there's the more minor characters. We got Fuck You, Albel, I'm the true edgelord.
Our home is gone. It's all space dust now. Nothing more, and nothing less.
Mr. Cold Metal Heart.
Please think rationally. What you see before you is nothing more than broken scrap. Feel free to cast it aside, without any feelings of guilt.
Whatever the fuck this is.
That was for rescuing me.
Sarah, who's the only character I don't actively hate, but sounds like she's whacked off her gourd on lithium.
I take it you had a chance to talk to Miss Elena, huh? You look just a little better, you know? Yes, I'm so glad.
Then there's Myuria. She has tons of personality. 2 personality. Oh, and how could I forget?
K.
The writing in this game is just bad on a fundamental level. I'm not going to pretend that the Star Ocean series was ever a bastion of elegant repartee. It was always stilted and unnatural in its delivery. But I just cannot stress enough how horrendous the writing in this game is. Characters constantly repeat their one character trait. The humor is some of the most unbearable I've ever seen in a video game, and I played Disgaea 4. Oh, I'll get to that one day, don't you worry. The major plot points throughout this story are cliche beyond reason, and the big plot twist. Ugh. Alright, skip to here if you don't want to get this plot spoiled for you. I don't know why you plan on playing this game, but there it is. Okay, so the universe is a video game twist from Star Ocean 3 was dumb. Really dumb. Star Ocean 4 looked at that and said, hey, hold my beer. So, the main antagonist to this game, the main villain, is FaZe. This guy.
Well, my name is FaZe Shifa Beleth. So, how about FaZe, Lim?
Limmel. Phase.
This guy.
No. Don't tell me. I don't want to know.
We're supposed to be afraid of this guy. We're supposed to feel bad for fighting this guy. No! just... no! I could not imagine a more inappropriate character for the role of main villain. He's not tragic, he's not intimidating. I don't feel threatened in any way by his presence. He's fail. I mean, I hate using that term, but that's the only word I can think of to describe him. He is fail. His entire arc just feels like it was made for the sole purpose of being a surprise twist, with nary a thought spared for the consequences or how to actually make it work. It's just stupid.
I'll take the box! The box! You took the box! Let's see what's in the box! Nothing! Absolutely nothing! Stupid! You're so stupid!
Everything about this game infuriates me. It feels like they were just handed this golden platter, so much potential to work from, and they dropped the ball so hard in so many ways. All right, let's just move on. It can't get worse from here, right? And here we are, Star Ocean, Integrity and Faithlessness. Let's just start where we always do. The game follows a boy named Fidel and a girl named Miki. They live in an underdeveloped planet called Faycreed, in a village that is seemingly under constant threat of bandit attacks. They head to the capital to enlist some aid, but along the way run into what is obviously a crashed spaceship. They, being from an underdeveloped planet, investigate this rock that fell from the sky, and find a young girl seemingly being held against her will by some generically evil henchmen.
What are you guys?
Don't talk, just put the girl down and go!
The girl doesn't talk much, but does seem to have strange powers at her command. Her name is Relia, and Fidel and Miki kinda make it their goal to take care of her. And so their adventures begin as the two fight to protect the girl, learn more about her strange powers, and discover the universe around them. The plot is meant to mirror that of the original Star Ocean, if that wasn't obvious by the pink-haired sorcerer and blue-haired swordsman from an underdeveloped planet. They even meet two humans, a captain with a knack for archery and a subordinate who fights with her fists. And so, I'm left wondering how I'm supposed to describe Star Ocean 5, and the only word I can really think of is disappointing. You can really tell that the game is trying hard to recapture the spirit of the first three games, but for every step forward they take, they just always seem to take 2 steps back. They brought back private actions in a big way. There's tons of them around in every single town. Every town you visit will have dozens of potential skits for you to view and enjoy. But unfortunately, the skits in this one are just pointless.
Emerson speaks very highly of you, Anne, especially your intelligence. Were you always so good at studying and such, even from a young age?
Of everyone I grew up with, I'd say my grandmother influenced me the most.
Your grandmother, you say?
Computers were her hobby, so when I was young, I would often play computer games or go on the internet with her.
Your grandmother sounds like an amazing woman. I'm so jealous of you.
They aren't acts, they aren't memorable moments, they aren't clever in any way. They're dialogue. They're 3 or 4 lines of dialogue shared between 2 characters.
Why are you always trying to talk to women?
Well, it's a boatload more fun than talking to men. Especially one guy I know. A big part of it is this. Women say what they think regardless of the situation.
Pardon my ignorance, but doesn't that make it harder to hold a conversation with them?
Exactly. Who would you rather go up against in a fight? A tenacious warrior or a complete pushover?
Well, that's obvious. I'd want to Oh, now I get it.
See? So much more fun.
There's no conflict in this movie!
They're just so pointless and inconsequential. And I'm not saying that the old games didn't have moments like that. These kind of events do have their place, but that's all there is. I cannot think of a single memorable event throughout the entirety of this game. No Welch trying to sell her wares on an unsuspecting populace. No Ashton's weird infatuation with barrels. No trying to win the affection of Ilya by buying her a pair of earrings. Nothing, just generic quips and dialogue. Normally, at this point, I would mention that at least the combat is improved, but It really isn't. It really feels like they came up with ideas that sound good on paper, but end up failing when actually executed. So, like this. Normally in the old games, when you came across an enemy, you'd be transported to this mystical arena of sorts where you'd duke it out, then after you beat them, you'd be transported back to the world map. So, the game developers thought to remove that aspect. Why not just fight them on the world map? That way you don't have that little bit of loading time entering and exiting every battle. I mean, it sounds like a good idea, but in practice, the problem comes from the camera. Whenever you enter a fight in, say, a tight-knit corridor or a cave or something like that, where there's tons of walls surrounding you, suddenly everything starts to feel cramped and uncomfortable. The camera doesn't have anywhere to go, and you're forced into these weird-looking situations where it's very difficult to follow what's going on. Now, I will say that the game does make a very solid effort of trying to make sure that most of the battles take place in the open, but that doesn't really fix the other problem, which is 7 party members. Now let's see, have you ever thought to yourself, hey, I'm fighting the literal manifestation of death here. Why have only 4 of my party members deigned to see that as a problem? Well, apparently the developers of Star Ocean 5 did, so every party member is available as long as they're around. It's honestly a very neat idea, but it fails to remember that this is a series famous for overly flashy particle effects. With so many members throwing out flashy attacks, constant damage numbers flying out everywhere, the screen transforms into this just bright white mess, even in the biggest of arenas. It can work at times, but the combat of Star Ocean, which used to be a joy to behold, is often just obscured by way too much going on at the same time. I mean, at the end of the day, Star Ocean 5 is not as bad as Star Ocean 4. The plot is simple, fairly generic, but it's competently executed. The characters are also decent. I quite liked Emerson and Anne. But with the private actions just being so bare bones, they lack any sort of charm that they would have had in the original games. It's just an overall mediocre experience. One you'll forget as soon as you finish. And honestly, that might be a bigger crime than the travesty that was Star Ocean 4. But the worst part about all this is the development. The producer of this game, Shuichi Kobayashi, really did want to create a game that harkened back to the originals. Something to capture a new audience and remind veterans of the series that Tri-Ace still cares about Star Ocean. Oh, and he was also worried that the ever-encroaching mobile game market would make games like Star Ocean obsolete. Of course, there's also a Star Ocean mobile game. Star Ocean Anamnesis? I think that's right. Try saying that 10 times fast. Yet another mighty series swallowed up by the monster that is the mobile game market. Another game designed to be as predatory as possible. Look flashy, sound amazing. Seriously, if one good thing came out of this game, listen to the soundtrack. But have absolutely no substance behind it. Be as bland and repetitive as possible. I'm sorry. Mobile games have questionable design choices that I personally hate, but at the end of the day, they're mostly just designed to be time killers. As long as you're smart, they can be decent for what they are. I shouldn't criticize an entire platform just because it's not what I prefer. And hey, at least I get to play with a bunch of my favorite characters from all the games. I could throw a team with Claude and Rena, or Cliff and Mirage, or, oh, of course I could go with Elia. What the fuck did they do to Elia? Nope. Fuck mobile games. Fuck Star Ocean. I'm out.